Welcome back, everybody. Rob from Crown of Thorns with a brand new Bible study video in front of the whiteboard. I'm pretty excited about that. It's just been busy the past 3 or 4 weeks. If you've been watching some of the videos I've been putting up, you'll know that we've been doing a lot of traveling, a lot of driving, and spent a lot of time away from home. Before we get started, I need to grab my glasses. I did this last time too. Alright, here we are. So here I am back in the RV in front of the whiteboard, which I'm glad to be here. I was thinking about doing these outside, but it's not always so quiet in this neighborhood. It's not a bad neighborhood. It's not horrible by any means. It's actually a rather nice neighborhood. Just want to make sure I'm not standing in front of that board, and also want to make sure I don't fall down these steps. So this is going to be a nice balancing act today, as always. But this is why I want to try to do it outside. I'll have a little more room. So we shall see. I'm doing the best that I can. Hopefully you guys can see everything on the board. In order for everything to fit, because this board runs, vertical rather than horizontal, I have to do kind of a wide shot, but then it kind of, it's zooming out is what it is. So I hope you can see what's written up here on this board. I ordered an HDMI cord so that I can run my camera to my TV like I used to do, and try to guess if I ordered the wrong one. The answer is yes. Either I ordered the wrong one or they sent the wrong one. I'm not exactly sure. I'll take the blame. It was probably me. I ordered the wrong one, so it doesn't work. So again, all I have to go by is the little screen on the camera. I promise you it's maybe 1.5 inches wide, maybe 2 inches, but it's not very big at all. I'm hoping everything shows up. I think what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to find a bigger room somewhere, somehow, or do it outside and just hope that it's relatively quiet outside. And I think I need to get back to a bigger whiteboard, the longer, wider, horizontal one, because this one is it's really hard to put everything up here, especially these timelines that I have going. It makes it really difficult. So we shall see. Doing the best that we can, right? That's what matters. And I noticed too that if I step forward too much, it cuts the top of my head off. See, that's the trick here. Being zoomed out enough to where this all fits in here, but then not being zoomed out too far so that, whatever. So anyway, guys, I want to jump right into this. We got a lot of ground to cover. I've done previous videos on Shemitah cycles. Just while I'm thinking about it, let me turn my ringer down. I've done probably 2 or 3, maybe even 4 different videos regarding Shemitah cycles. And I've been talking about it for a while now, how I wanted to do another one on Shemitah cycles with some new additional information that I've come across. And I've been actually working on this in the background, so to speak, for probably 6 or 7 months whenever I started first talking about that. And then I just kind of escalated the process in the past couple of weeks. But there's a lot of new stuff that I've come across. And that's the great thing about studying your Bible and studying anything that pertains to the Bible. You're always going to come across new stuff, new information. And that's what we've got in this Bible study. So I'm about 4 minutes in, so let me jump in here. I'll try not to run too many rabbit trails, but we know how that goes. I would like to keep this as one video. We shall see. So we're talking about Shemitah cycles and how this year is the 70th Jubilee. What do I mean by that? Well, stay tuned and you'll find out. I really do believe, now I know I've said this before, and I'm not going to name a date, and I'm not going to dogmatically say this, but I really do believe that we are very, very close to the return of Jesus Christ. We have to be. We know we're in the end times. We see everything unfolding exactly as Jesus said it would. We've already seen some precursors to what we know as the mark of the beast, and the one world religion and the one world currency. Boy, if you're following anything that's on the media right now, or what's happening in world events, we know, if you've got your eyes open, truly got your eyes open, that there are certain things that have happened recently that would qualify as a precursor to the mark of the beast. We know that we're headed toward a one world currency if certain things unfold as they say they will. We shall see. But not only that, but the way everything is starting to line up, and I said this in a previous video, Shemitah cycles, about how 2021, 22 were very, very likely to be the year that Christ would come back. But I always maintained you're dealing with different calendars. So it could go one way or the other easily. Okay? And what I've come across in this new study just makes all the more sense. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean that for the next 15 years I'm just going to keep making videos about, well, you know, what we have to do is adjust this and that. I don't want to do that because it becomes tired, worn out, and it starts to look hollow. And I don't want that. Just regular spring water today. A brand that you don't see around here, I don't know if you can see that, it says Deer Park. These are really, this brand is all over in the South. Once you hit like Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama especially, this brand Deer Park, you see it frequently. I have not seen this brand up here, but obviously these are from when we were down south. Tastes like spring water, which is good. Anyway, I don't want to always have an excuse as to why it didn't turn out the way I hoped. That's not the point, and that's not what I'm doing. What I am doing is, okay, you come up with a hypothesis, okay, you test it. If it doesn't pan out that way, what do? Do you just quit? No, of course not. How many times did Edison have to experiment before he got the light bulb correct? What if you would have just stopped after the first failure? All right, so if it doesn't work, it's not that you're going to try to change stuff up so that you suddenly become right. I don't care if I'm right. We know that God's timing is what's right. The point is, if this hypothesis doesn't work, all right, then dig back in, find some new information, put some stuff together, and come up with something new. That's the point. That's what studying your Bible is all about, okay? And that's what we have here. And there are a couple of key factors that I didn't realize before that have come to my attention that make a whole lot of sense as to why 2023 could be the year that Jesus comes back. Now, I always maintain, too, that, remember this, the Jewish New Year starts September with the Feast of Trumpets. All right? Right around there, Rosh Hashanah and all that. Okay. So, when it turned 2022 last year in January, it didn't turn to 2022 until September of last year. So on the Jewish calendar right now, it is still 2022 until we get to September. Then it will become 2023 on the Jewish calendar. See what I'm saying? That's the first caveat, if you will, is that it's still technically 2022 on a Jewish calendar. Okay, so keep that in mind. I've always maintained that. But there's other stuff too that comes into play, and we're going to jump into that today. Now, this is going to jump around a lot, so hang on. But we're going to cover as much of it as we can. All right? So, first and foremost, Matthew 24:36. Go there, because this is going to be the people, the naysayers. That's going to be the first verse that they run to. So let's just get that out of the way right now. Matthew 24:36, which says, "But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only." Jesus said that. Won't argue that. He said that during his earthly ministry, right here. All right? He said that. And of course, remember, Jesus never talks about the rapture. That would be revealed to Paul later. So of that day, he's talking about the day of the Lord, or the second coming, the battle of Armageddon, whatever you want to call it. This arrow pointing down right here. That's what he was talking about. Never talked about the rapture. So that, first and foremost. Okay? Secondly, this was said during his earthly ministry. So later he dies, is buried, resurrects. He hangs around for 40 days. Then he ascends up into heaven. where he now sits at the right hand of God and has done so for about 2,000 years. I have a hard time believing that God and Jesus are sitting there next to each other for 2,000 years, and every now and again they just kind of look at each other, maybe slight wave, but have never said anything, never discussed anything, particularly never discussed when Jesus is going to come back. I think the Father at some point in this 2,000 years, probably sooner than later, said to Jesus, hey, by the way, I know you didn't know down there because you were on earth and you were, a man, still God, but man too. But by the way, this is when you're going back. Just so you know, just throwing it out there. If you want to get ready, make sure your beard's groomed just right. Whatever you want to do, you got 2,000 years. You can prepare for that. I'm sure they've discussed it. And here's how I know they've discussed it. Let's go to Revelation chapter 3. And by the way, grooming your beard just right to make any kind of a return, I think, is important. I take great pride in grooming my beard, no matter where I'm going. All right? Anyway, Revelation 3:3. Revelation 3:3. In fact, speaking of my beard, really quickly, I put this in a previous video. While we were down in Alabama retrieving our vehicles, we went and spent the day and a night at Dinosaur Adventureland, Kent Hovind, the Creation Science Museum that he has there. Fascinating, highly recommend it to anyone and everyone. But he always films, every evening he films a YouTube video, kind of like what I'm doing now. And so we went to the church building they have where they do the filming, and we sat in and watched as he filmed, and something came up that pertained to beards, and so he asked me to come up, and it was really cool. Got to be on his YouTube video with him for a few minutes. Pretty cool. If you get a chance, go to Kent Hovind's channel. I recommend that anyway. I don't agree with everything that he says. I don't believe in a post-trib rapture like he does. All right. But 99% of what he teaches, I agree with. So you should go to his channel anyway, especially for anything pertaining to creation versus evolutionism. He is the leading authority on that by far. All right. But watch the video about hippos. That's the one I'm in, if you'd like to. No big deal. All right. So anyway, how did I get to all that? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Revelation 3:3. What does Jesus say here? And now, he's in heaven at this point. He's died, buried, resurrected, hung around 40 days, ascended into heaven. Now he's speaking to John. Okay, this is after Paul even. After what Jesus said to Paul, this is what he's saying to John, even after all of that. And this is what he says in Revelation 3:3. Remember therefore how thou hast received and heard, and hold fast and repent. If therefore, this is the part, if therefore thou shalt not watch, I will come on thee as a thief, and thou shalt not know what hour I will come upon thee. So he's saying, if you're not watching, I'm going to come upon you as a thief, and you'll not know what hour I'm about to return. All right? Well, then conversely, if you do the opposite, if I am watching, he won't come upon me as a thief, because I will know what hour he's about to return. We are to be looking. All those people who run to Matthew 24:36 and say, see, we're not even supposed to be looking. You're not supposed to know. Not even Jesus knows. Yes, that's true when he was here on earth. I don't understand why people get stuck on one verse and they just have this tunnel vision and that's it. Nothing else can even permeate their line of thought, their reasoning, their vocabulary, nothing. That's it. You have to compare other scriptures. You have to dig outside of that one favorite verse that you have. All right? And later, after his earthly ministry, this is what he says. Conversely, if you are watching, I won't come upon you as a thief, because you'll know even the hour. Jesus said hour, at which I'm coming. So that's what we're doing here today. That's what we do in most of the videos. We're looking, we're waiting, we're anticipating the return of Christ. First for the rapture, 7 years later for the second coming. But we are supposed to be looking. We're supposed to be aware. We're supposed to be doing that research, that digging. Okay? Don't let people tell you otherwise. All right, 15 minutes in. I got to get going. So, before we go any further, let's do our core verses. I don't want to forget these. So we have 1 Corinthians 15, 1 through 4. That is the gospel encapsulated, the gospel of Paul. Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles. Okay? And I always say, remember that salvation is the who and the what. Okay? Who? You have to know who Jesus is. You have to know, believe, trust, have faith that Jesus is God. If you don't have that part, you're lost. You're not saved. Okay? So that's the first part. You have to know who Jesus is. The second part is what. Well, Paul tells us what is in 1 Corinthians 15, 1 through 4. He tells us about the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. We must trust 100% on what Jesus did, 0% on what we do. Okay? Our salvation lies solely with Jesus Christ. All we can do is trust. Trusting is the only thing you can do that is not a work. And we know in Ephesians 2:8-9 that our salvation is by faith alone, not of works. So you have to trust on what Jesus did on that cross. All right, Romans 3:25, again, a book of Paul, takes it a step farther, or maybe it's further, and says that we must trust on his blood. Without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sin. Hebrews 9:22, which means if Jesus would have choked to death eating a taco, and then they threw him up on a cross, and then he died, and then they buried him and resurrected him, and he resurrected. If he didn't shed any blood, guess what? We're still lost. We're still covered in sin. The only thing that removes our sin is the blood of Jesus Christ. It washes away all of our sins, past, present, and future. So if he chokes on a burrito or a hot dog or a hamburger and doesn't shed any blood, good for him that he was able to conquer death and resurrect. Awesome. Does nothing for us. He must shed his blood, and he did. And now we have to trust on that atoning blood. All right? And when you trust on the atoning blood, you get saved instantaneously. It's not a process. It doesn't take weeks or months or years or anything else. It's instantaneous. And guess what? If somebody is like, well, I don't believe that stuff anymore, too late, you're saved. It's the way it goes. All right, last but not least, Ephesians, another book of Paul. How about that? Ephesians 1:13, which tells us that once you're saved, you're always saved. You are sealed by that Holy Spirit. You cannot lose your salvation because it has 0% to do with you, 100% to do with what Jesus did on the cross. And that's why he said, it is finished. It's done. All right, now let's jump into this. Shemitah cycles, what are they? Well, when the Jews first entered into Israel way back, after Moses, of course, is not allowed to go into the land of Canaan. So Joshua is appointed, and now Joshua is going to lead them into the land of Canaan. And as soon as they get into the land of Canaan, they're supposed to start keeping track of these 7-year periods, Shemitah cycles. And in that 7th year, what they would do is give the land rest, and they would forgive debts. Okay, notice 7 and 70 always come up a lot in the Bible. It's the number of completion. 7 days in a week. When you get through 7 days of the week, it's complete. You now start a new one. All right? So let's go to a couple of verses back in the Old Testament. Go to Deuteronomy. All right? Deuteronomy chapter 16. Deuteronomy 16, and we're going to look at verse 8. 6 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day shall be a solemn assembly to the Lord thy God. Thou shalt do no work therein. 7 weeks shalt thou number unto thee, begin to number the 7 weeks from such time as thou beginnest to put the sickle to the corn. And thou shalt keep the feast of weeks unto the Lord thy God with the tribute of a freewill offering of thine hand, which thou shalt give unto the Lord thy God, according as the Lord thy God hath blessed thee. Now I'm going to stop there. That's telling the Jews. God's telling the Jews that 6 days you do this. On the 7th day you stop. It's a rest, just like their Sabbath. The Sabbath is Saturday, the 7th day of the week. That number 7. All right. Now go to Leviticus 25. All right, Leviticus chapter 25. I'm going to look at verses 1 through 4 and 8 through 10. Leviticus 25, 1 through 4. And the Lord spake unto Moses in Mount Sinai, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep a Sabbath unto the Lord. Okay? 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, and 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, and gather in the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow thy field, nor prune thy vineyard. So 6 years you can do all your farming, reaping and sowing and all that good stuff. But that 7th year, let the land rest. And if you look, I went to Michigan State, a agricultural type college. And one of the first things, I wasn't in agriculture, but some people I knew were. And it's funny because they would always talk about, and I don't think they even realized what they were saying, but yeah, when you plant your crops or whatever, every 7 years you need to get, on that 7th year you need to give your land some rest and either change up the crop you're going to put there, or at the very least let it rest for that 7th year and then start over. And it never even resonated with me even at the time, but later on when I was reading this, I was like, wait a minute, that's not just biblical, that's scientific. Most farmers, if they're smart, they know. You can do it for 6 years, but on the 7th year, you better give that land some rest. Otherwise, you're going to absorb all the nutrients, and it becomes no good. The land's no good. It's a gravel pit. All right. Let's keep going. What else did I say? 8 through 10. And thou shalt number 7 Sabbaths of years unto thee, 7 times 7 years, and the space of 7 Sabbaths of years shall be unto thee 49 years. So you have these 7 years, the Shemitah cycle of 7 years. 6 years you plant, 1 year of rest. When you get to 7 of those, now you've done 7 of these Shemitah cycles, now you're at 49 years. All right? Then shalt thou cause the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month. In the day of atonement shall you make the trumpet sound throughout all your land. And you shall hallow the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. It shall be a jubilee unto you, and you shall return every man unto his possession, and you shall return every man unto his family. In other words, all debts were canceled. All indentured servants were to be released from their bondage. Now, that's not slavery. An indentured servant was, if I went to you and I'm like, look, I have $0 and I need to buy this land over here. Well, you might loan me X number of dollars to buy the land, but in return, rather than me just paying back X number of dollars, we'd make an agreement that I would work for you for 7 years. An indentured servant. Once I fulfilled those 7 years, or 8 years, or whatever, then the debt was paid. Okay? But if that were to happen, and we agreed on 7 years, but it started, say, midway through a Shemitah cycle, or especially here, the 49th year. If we got into that 50th year and I was only into my repaying of you, my only 3rd year, wouldn't matter. Released. Those other 4 years that I owe you, they're gone. I don't have to pay you. I don't have to work those 4 years. Okay? So everything was to be released, and that's why it says every man returned to his family. It just meant that he's no longer an indentured servant. He can go out and get whatever job he wants now. All right? So you'd have the 7 cycles of 7 Shemitah cycles. That's 49 years. So when 49 years passes, there's that 50th year. That's the year of Jubilee. Now that's going to come into play here a little bit later. All right? Why is that important? And it's something I missed until I went back and kind of looked at some stuff. All right. Yeah. So, keep this in mind too. That 50th year, that year of Jubilee, was only to be recognized, celebrated, if the Jews were in their land. Okay? Keep that in mind. So whenever the Jews were outside of their land, like when they were exiled during Babylon, they didn't have to observe that. They, in a lot of ways, maybe they couldn't, but they didn't have to, because they were no longer in the land of Canaan, or the promised land, Israel. All right? So, Shemitah cycles, what do we got going on here? Well, like I said, those cycles started as soon as they went into the land of Canaan. They crossed the river Jordan, bam, start keeping track of those 7-year cycles. All right? Now, the problem is, eventually they would no longer observe that 7th year of rest. They weren't giving their land any rest. So remember, later on, if you read like in Daniel, they go into exile. God allows Nebuchadnezzar to come in and destroy Jerusalem, and take the Jews into captivity. So while they're over there in Babylon in captivity, they don't have to observe that 50th year, but they were there for 70 years. Why? Because they had missed 70 of those year of Jubilees. So God's going to make them make up for it now. You missed 70 of those years of Jubilee. Well, now you're going to spend 70 years in the land of, or in Babylon, in captivity. Remember, those Jubilees were every 50 years. So you have to keep that in mind. 7 of those 50 years, that means over at least 350 to 400 years, they never observed that 7th year of rest for the land. So they missed 70 of those 50-year marks. Okay? So now they're going to make up for it by serving 7 years captivity, or 70 years captivity in Babylon. That was the reason they were there. Okay? The main reason. Not the only, but one of the main reasons. Okay? So, they only have to observe the year of Jubilee, that 50th year, if they're in the land of Canaan, or in Israel at that point. They weren't there. They were in captivity in Babylon. They didn't have to observe that. But they were making up for the ones they had missed by serving the 70 years in captivity. All right? So, of course, they get to return to their land. We'll get to that in a second. And that brings us up to, when Ezra and Nehemiah, they're rebuilding. And then right up into the time of Christ, when the Romans are now in charge. Okay? But remember, in 70 AD, Titus, the Roman, goes in there, destroys it all. And now the Jews are all over. They're exiled, so to speak, but they're scattered abroad. Okay? Until we get to a certain time when they get to come back. All right? And that's where these Shemitah cycles come back in. Now, even though they were scattered abroad, the Jews are notorious for they are very meticulous. Okay? Even if they don't always follow what they're supposed to do, they know. They know their stuff. And if you can go back and you can do the counting and adding yourself if you want to. I'm not going to do it for you. But the Jews have kept track of when these Shemitah cycles were happening. Now, they didn't have to observe, but they were keeping track. Even all that time that they've been scattered abroad for 2,000 years almost, which is miraculous. All right, for 2,000 years, they're still keeping track of these Shemitah cycles. All right? So the Jews get to come back to their land starting in 1947, right after World War II. Okay? So they become a nation in 1948. All right? So from there, when they became a nation in 1948, they were in the midst of a Shemitah cycle. Now they've kept track of that. Okay? So you don't count that first Shemitah cycle because it's only like 3 or 4 years left of that Shemitah cycle. So we're counting the full Shemitah cycles from the time that Israel became a nation again in 1948. So that's what I've done here. The next Shemitah cycle, full, would have started 1952. 7 years, it ends in 1959. 59 to 66, 66 to 73, so on and so forth, okay? So you get all of these, Shemitah cycles. Now, in my previous ones, you would go 73 to 80, 80 to 87, 87 to 94, 94 to 2001. Makes sense. What I had done before was I would go, okay, well, 7 years, 2001 to 2008, 2008, 2015, 15 to 22, right? Wrong. Remember what I said about those 50th years. Those 7 years, after you get 7 times 7, you get 49 years. That 50th year is the year of Jubilee. When you hit the year of Jubilee, that year does not count as the first year of the next Shemitah cycle. Okay? I hope you understand what I'm saying. You would wait till that 50th year was over, then the next year would start the next Shemitah cycle. Well, that 50th year, that year number 50, which by the way happened to be the 50th Jubilee, was in 2002, 2003. Remember, their calendar carries over September to September. So 2002, 2003 was that 50th year of Jubilee. So you wouldn't count 2002 as the next year, or even 2001. You wouldn't go 94 to 2001, 2001 to 2008. No, that 50th year is right there. You had to bump that 1 year. So now, the next one starts in 2002. So now the next one is 2009. See what I'm saying there? Because remember, 2001 for us is from January to December. 2001 for them is going to be from September to September, which is 2001 and 2002 on our calendar. And again, this where it gets confusing because we're using two different calendars. So that would have been that 2001 to 2002 on their calendar, their 50th year. That 50th Jubilee, in fact, too. So 2002, okay, most of 2002, except for when you get to September, is that year of Jubilee. So for us, on our calendar, 2002, okay, is the pushback year. So now you're going to go 7 years from 2002. What do you get? 2009. Not 2008, 2009. You got to push it back 1 year. I know that's confusing to go back and forth on those two calendars, but you got to do that. But yeah, it's going to push that back 1 year. So now instead of 2001 to 2008, it's going to be 2001 to 2009, only because you've got to take a year off for that year of Jubilee. So the next one starts at 2009, 2009 to 2016, 2016 to 2023. 2023 to 2030. Okay? Interesting stuff. 2023. Before, I always had 2022 up there because I didn't know to take a year off for the year of Jubilee. Nor did I know that it was significant and that it was the 50th Jubilee. All right? Now, with that in mind, that pushed everything back 1 year on our calendar. Their calendar too, but I'm using our calendar right now, to 2023. Well, that's this year, right now. Now, it doesn't become 2023 until September on the Jewish calendar. Remember that, okay? So 2023, that's interesting for a number of reasons. We'll get to that. Now, here's the other thing I want to talk about. 2023, by the way, is the 70th Jubilee. 70. Remember, we talked about that before. The number 70, or 7 and 70 are both completion. 7 days a week, completion. The 70 years in captivity, the exile, completion. All right? This is the 70th year, the 70th Jubilee. 50 was at 2002, the 70th, 22 and 23. So there you are again, 70 being the number of completion as well. All right? Now, what does this all mean? Here's the other thing you want to look at. I've numbered these different Shemitah cycles. All right? Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right now, we're in that 10th one, barely, but we're in that 10th Shemitah cycle. Okay? These 7-year periods. Starting in this year, September, the 11th Shemitah cycle will start. Now, I've done videos before on gematria, the significance of the numbers. We've been talking about that. 70, 7, 12, 40. All of these numbers are significant in the Bible. Well, 11, if you look at that, what does the number 11 represent? It represents judgment. 11 is the number of judgment. All right. Number of judgment. All right, let's take a look at something else here. How do I want to do this? Well, let's do it like this. 11 is the number of judgment starting in 2023 to 2030. Now, if we know that it's been approximately 2,000 years since the time of Christ, and we know that human history is going to be 6,000 years, and then there will be 1,000 years of rest, which is the millennial kingdom, all right, working off the premise that a day is 1,000 years, 1,000 years is a day, all right? So taking the creation history, the creation event, each of those days of creation, 1 through 6, would represent 6,000 years of human history. That 7th day of rest, when God rested, would be the final 1,000 years. That's the millennial kingdom. Okay? So, with that in mind, we are coming up on the rapture very quickly. What if the rapture comes in 2023? And from 2023 to 2030 is the 7-year tribulation. Wouldn't that correlate perfectly with the 11th Shemitah cycle, which is from 2023 to 2030, and 11, the 11th one being the number of judgment? Isn't that what the tribulation is all about? It's about judgment. God goes back to dealing with the Jews. He's going to pass judgment on them for forsaking, for denying their Messiah. 3 times, by the way. Right? Do you see how this could all correlate so perfectly? 11 is the number of judgment. We're coming on the 11th Shemitah cycle, which is 7 years long. The tribulation is also 7 years long, and it is a time of judgment. 2023 to 2030 could very well be that tribulation period. Now down here I also have the feasts. All right? There are 7 feasts that the Jews observe. There are 4 of them that take place in the spring, and 4 which take place in the fall, 3 which take place in the fall. Now Jesus already fulfilled the spring festivals during his earthly ministry. Passover, unleavened bread, the first fruits, and Pentecost. All right? So, let me find where I'm at. These feasts reflect Christ, and Jesus fulfilled the spring feast, his death, burial, and resurrection. Go to 1 Corinthians chapter 5. 1 Corinthians chapter 5. And we're going to look at verse 7. 1 Corinthians 5, verse 7. Which says, "Purge out therefore the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened. For even Christ our Passover is sacrificed for us." Here we are. He is our Passover. We're the unleavened, but we're getting rid of that. All right? Go 1 Corinthians still, chapter 15. 1 Corinthians 15. And we're going to look at verses 20 and 23. Verse 20 says, "But now Christ is risen from the dead, and become the first fruits of them that slept." First fruits. By the way, why does it say first fruits, plural? Well, remember, during the death, burial, and resurrection, Jesus died, was buried. He was in for 3 days. Remember, he went to hell, the paradise side, and he preached to those Old Testament saints that were in paradise. Remember, they could not go to heaven because their sins were not washed away. They were merely covered by animal blood. So they were in the center of the earth. The good side, hell had two compartments, torment and paradise. The Old Testament saints that were faithful and did their works, faith plus works, they were on that paradise side, and Jesus went down and preached to them. And it says that he led captivity captive. So Jesus is the first fruits, plural, because he went to heaven, but he also took all those Old Testament saints that were in paradise with him. All right? Verse 23. But every man in his own order, Christ the first fruits, afterward they that are Christ at his coming. This is talking about the rapture now. This is Paul talking, so he's talking about the rapture. All right? Go to Acts chapter 1. Acts chapter 1. I'm going to look at verse 9. Acts 1, verse 9. And when he had spoken these things, while they beheld, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. This is when Jesus ascended. Remember, death, burial, resurrection, hangs around for 40 days. There's that number 40. And then he ascends up into heaven. And it says that the disciples, the apostles, Peter and all those guys, Simon, who was the one that, the non-believer, Thomas. Anyway, they're watching as Jesus goes up in this cloud, and the angel said, "Why are you staring? The way they see him going, that's the way he's going to return." And Paul talks about that too, how when he comes back at the rapture, he'll be coming in the clouds. Now, Jesus also says, at his second coming, he'll be coming in the clouds. Okay? Put all that together, 3 times, Jesus is going to be in the clouds. 3 makes sense to me. All right. So, with that being said, Jesus fulfilled those spring festivals. All that are left now are these, the fall festivals. Christ needs and will fulfill these fall festivals when he comes back, okay? When he comes back at the rapture. Because he's going to, these feasts, yes, it was a way for the Jews to commemorate certain events and certain miracles and great things that God had done for the Jews. But they're also painting a picture of Christ. They represent Christ. So when Christ came the first time, he had to fulfill those spring festivals. When he comes back at the rapture, he will fulfill these remaining fall festivals, these last 3. All right? So, why do I say that? What makes me think that Jesus will come back to fulfill these fall festivals at the rapture? Well, let's take a look at a couple of verses. Go to 1 Corinthians, again, chapter 15. 1 Corinthians 15. We're going to look at verse 52. So 15:52. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. Excuse me. So why do I say that the rapture will happen and Jesus will fulfill these fall festivals? And why do I think it's going to happen here? Well, this Feast of Trumpets is the first of the fall festivals. It usually takes place September, October. All right? But it says here, Paul is telling us that in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound. The trumpet shall sound. Paul is talking about the rapture, when Christ comes back to gather his church. This is what's going to happen. This trump shall sound. This trumpet will sound. Well, that correlates perfectly with the Feast of Trumpets, where they blow that shofar 100 times, and that last one is the last trump. All right? Also, here's the other thing. The Jews, this Feast of Trumpets is also known as this, the feast of which no man knows the day or the hour. What a weird name for a festival. The feast of which no one knows the day nor the hour. Why did they call it that? Well, remember, these are based on the moon. Remember, God gave us the stars, the moon, and the sun for signs and seasons. And there's different ways to study those things. You have to be careful. If you do it the right way, scientifically, that's astronomy. If you're doing it to try to predict futures and your fates and summon the dead and whatever else, that's astrology, and that's satanic. That's evil. But David told us to look to the stars. Okay? There are signs in heaven. Now, the Jews require a sign. We don't require a sign, but again, I've said this before, if the sign is right there, it makes good sense to pay attention to what it says. Look, when I'm driving down the highway, I'm not, well, sometimes I am, but just pretend I'm not looking for a sign that says Burger King. But if I see it, it's right there. It's not my fault that I see it. I can't pretend I don't see it. I wasn't necessarily looking for it, but there it is. A big sign in the sky that says Burger King. Am I just going to pretend like it's not there? No, I'm going to say, oh, there's that. There must be a Burger King there. I'm getting off on this exit. I'm ready to eat. So if the signs are already there, we should be paying attention to them. Okay? We don't require a sign, but we would be smart to pay attention to what's happening. And our entire calendar, our entire flat earth is based off the sun, moon, and stars. Okay? And that's a topic for another day, but there we are. So anyway, why would they call it that? Well, these other feasts are based on the moon. Okay? This Feast of Trumpets, the reason why they said it's the feast of which no one knows the day or nor the hour is because they could not set a determined date for the Feast of Trumpets, because for whatever reason during that time, that season, September, October, they never knew exactly when the moon was going to show up. It would literally be like a day before it actually happened. It would be like they would see the moon and be like, oh, now there it is. But they only had like a 1-day warning. Okay? And they'd have to have two people. They'd have two guys out there watching for the moon. And be like, oh, there it is. And they would have witness. Remember, 2 is the number of witness. When they said, yep, there it is, now they knew when this Feast of Trumpets could take place. The other ones they knew well in advance. They could watch it. Oh yeah, the moon will be coming around about a week or 2 or a month from now, and that's when we'll have it. No, this Feast of Trumpets, 1-day warning at best. And then they would say, okay, now it's time for the Feast of Trumpets. That's why they called it the feast of which no man knows the day nor the hour. What does that say? Going back to what Jesus said, Matthew 24:36. No one knows the day nor the hour. But he was talking to Jews. He was talking to Jews. Okay? And we got information after that, Revelation 3:3, which tells us that we can know. But it's just funny that the Jews, because they don't recognize Christ as their Messiah, so they wouldn't know. But they call that Feast of Trumpets also the feast of which no man knows the day nor the hour. How ironic. Not a coincidence either. So there it is again. I think that's why. That's a good time and place, I think, for Christ to make his return at the rapture, is at the Feast of Trumpets. Paul correlates it with a trumpet. The Jews correlate it with a trumpet. And he would say, oh, no man knows the day nor the hour. I just think there's too much there to just pass it off as coincidence, all right? They could not determine the full moon until about the day before, and 2 witnesses had to pronounce it. I just talked about that. And then, of course, again, they would blow that shofar 100 times. 100 times. And that last one was the last trump. All right? Now, again, this usually takes place in September. It could be October, but typically speaking, it's September when this feast takes place. Now, we're going to jump into a couple of other things. Speaking of September, I want you to... Some of you might be familiar with this date. Some of you may not be. But we're going to talk about it because it's very important. September 23rd, 2017. A lot of people were getting very excited about this date. Now, it was back in 2017, so 6 years ago. But people were getting very, very excited about this date. Why? Well, let's take a look at it. And it correlates a lot with what we're talking about here today. Go to Revelation chapter 12. Revelation chapter 12. We're going to read the first 2 verses. All right. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered. All right? A crown of 12 stars. This woman, the moon's at her feet. She's clothed with the sun. She's got a crown with 12 stars. And she's about to give birth. Okay? And it's funny, too. My mom had asked about this not too long ago. Well, what does that represent? Well, that's Israel and giving birth to the Messiah. All right? So let's take a look at this, too. I know we're jumping around a lot. I hope this all pulls together for you. And I got not much time, but we're going to make it happen. All right. I want you to go to the book of Hosea. Hosea. All right. Go to Hosea chapter 6. We're going to look at verse 1. Come, and let us return unto the Lord, for he hath torn, and he will heal us. He hath smitten, and he will bind us up. Verse 2. After 2 days will he revive us, and the 3rd day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. That's interesting. Look at, keep that in mind, Hosea 6, 1 and 2. Now go to 2 Peter 3, 8. I talked about this before. 2 Peter 3, 8. Which says, But beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. All right? So we got 2 days, which is 2,000 years. Right? And Hosea says, after 2 days he will revive us, and the 3rd day he will raise us up. Well, from the time of Christ, like I said, it's been about 2,000 years. So these 2 days, after he will revive us, these 2 days, that's from the time of Christ to the time of the second coming, that 2,000 years. The 3rd day, it says, in the 3rd day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. That's the millennial kingdom. So Hosea is also telling us that from the time of Christ to where we are right now is 2,000 years. That 3rd day is the millennial kingdom. So again, we're narrowing this thing down to the fact that, 1, the creation dictates how long human history is. 6,000 years, and then 1,000 years of rest. That's 1,000 years of human history from the time of Adam to where we are about right now. That final 1,000 years, that year of rest, the day of rest, is the millennial kingdom. Hosea is saying from the time of Christ, there's 2,000 years where he's going to revive us. All right, there it is. And in that 3rd day, he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. Of course, Jesus will live in their sight. He will rule and reign from Jerusalem during this time. Do you see how all of this is kind of pulling together? All right, go to 1 Thessalonians 5. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. And we're going to look at verses 1 through 6. But of the times and the seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord, millennial kingdom, remember, the day of Christ is the rapture. It's a one-day event. The day of the Lord is 1,000 years. It's the millennial kingdom. And it's important to know the difference between the two, and it's important to have a King James Bible, because in the newer perversions, they use those terms conversely, and they're not. They're not synonymous. They're not the same. They're two different events. All right, so you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. Okay? For when they shall say, peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. Going back to Revelation 12. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness. What? What is this? Paul is saying, the times and the seasons I have no need to write unto you, for you know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. People say, see, you won't know, can't tell. No. Keep going. Don't stop there. Verse 4 says, but ye, brethren, talking to us Gentiles, are not in darkness, that the day should overtake you as a thief. You see, going back to Revelation 3:3, you can know when this day is going to happen. You can know, because you're not in darkness. Ye are all the children of light and the children of the day. We are not of the night nor of darkness. Therefore let us not sleep as do others, but let us watch and be sober. Let us watch. Do not sleep. You can know. Revelation 3:3, and now here it is again. 1 Thessalonians 5:1-6. Again, you can't take just one verse and say, oh, there it is, and dogmatically just stand on that one verse. You got to compare it to other ones and rightly divide. Okay? So that's not us. All right, let's go to 2 Timothy chapter 3. 2 Timothy chapter 3. Which is right after that. 2 Timothy chapter 3. And we're going to read verses 1-7. This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. Boy, have we seen that? For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. From such turn away. For of this sort are they which creep into houses, and lead captive silly women, laden with sins, led away with divers lusts, ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of truth. We see that right now, all the time. How many supposed preachers, pastors out there do nothing but preach this prosperity gospel? You're living your best life now. And they never ever talk about hell. They never ever talk about the consequences of sin. They might even ever talk about sin. And Jesus is warning, Paul is warning us about that. Jesus spoke far more about hell than he did about heaven. Why are there so many preachers today that do the opposite thereof? I don't understand it. Well, I do understand it. It's ear candy. See, if you only talk about the good things and you tell people that they're living their best life now and that you just name it and claim it and it's all yours, well, gee, you're going to get you're going to get a huge audience. Those people want to hear that. They want to hear that. You start telling them about the bad stuff, the consequence of sin, that they may be living in sin, oh, they back away. People don't want that. That's why good churches rarely exist. But if they do, they have a congregation of about 15 people. Then you look at the Joel Osteens and the Joyce Meyers and the T.D. Jakes of the world, and they've got arenas full of people. Why? Because they're preaching a prosperity gospel. They're preaching a name it and claim it gospel, none of which is biblical. None of it. But that's how you keep people. That's how you gather people. It's unfortunate. All right. Let's take a look at the 70 weeks of Daniel. And we're only going to talk briefly about this because I'm running out of time. But remember, I talked about this before. The Jews went into captivity because they were missing those Jubilee years. So they had to do 70 years in captivity. All right? Now, God said to Daniel, 70 weeks are appointed unto you and your people, Daniel. Well, who's that? That would be the Jews. So for those of you who insist that the church is going to be here for the tribulation, please read Daniel, where God makes it clear that this tribulation, these 70 weeks, are determined upon Daniel and his people. Okay? Jews. Now, we know that from the time that the decree was given for the Jews to go back and rebuild the temple, the wall, Ezra, Nehemiah, to the time that Jesus rode in to Jerusalem on that donkey, 69 weeks or 483 years were accomplished. Okay? 483 years accomplished right there. That leaves 1 week left of 7 years. Okay? So from the time that the decree went out to rebuild the temple to the time that Jesus went in was 69 weeks or 483 years. That leaves 1 week left of 7 years. Well, what do you think that is? Right here. The 7-year tribulation. Remember, those weeks are the same as years. 7 weeks, 7 years. 7 years. That final week, which was determined upon Daniel and his people, will be accomplished here at this tribulation period. That's the last 7 years to make the 490. 7 years. Again, yet another evidence that, one, the church will not be here for the tribulation. 2, that it is a pre-trib rapture. And 3, that God is not done with the Jews at all. He goes back to dealing with the Jews during this 7 years, that final week of Daniel. Now, I want to try to wrap this all together really quickly. These Shemitah cycles, 7-year periods of 7 years. 6 years, they could farm the land. That 7th year, they need to give a rest. When you accomplish 7 of those 7-year cycles, you get 49 years. That 50th year is the year of Jubilee, when all debts are forgiven, no planting, no farming, nothing. It's a year of complete rest, that 50th year. All right? Because the Jews didn't observe those like they were supposed to, they go into captivity for 70 years. Okay? But those Shemitah cycles were continuing to happen, and the Jews were continuing to keep track. Even if only in their minds, they may not have been observing it, because again, those years of Jubilee only have to be observed while they're in the land, which wouldn't happen until 1948, when they got to come back and form their own nation. So they pick up right from where they left off. That first full Shemitah cycle from the time that Israel became a nation in 48 was starting in 1952. 7 years, every 7 years, you got another Shemitah cycle happening. But again, when you get to that 50th year, which was in 2002, 2003, now a couple of things. They got to give the rest, but 2, it pushes the next Shemitah cycle back 1 year. Okay? Also, during this time, since the Jews have come back to Israel, the 50th Jubilee was in 2001, 2, right there. So you push the next one back 1 year. It starts in 2009 to 2016 to 2023. So the next Shemitah cycle starts in 2023. Now that could be our 2023, or it could be the 2023 on the Jewish calendar, which will start this September and run through September of 2024 for us. Okay? So if it's not this this September, it could be next September. Why do I say September? Well, 1, I think we're getting close to that Shemitah cycle where it's number 11, and that's the number of judgment. That would correlate perfectly to this 7-year tribulation, which is the number of judgment, the time of judgment, going back to Daniel's 70 weeks. Okay? But we're determined upon Daniel and his people. All right? Sorry. I thought somebody was approaching. I guess not. Good. All right. So, with all of that in place, we also know, too, that the 70th Jubilee is coming up. 70 again being like a number of completion, just like the number of 7. They did 70 years in captivity. 70th Jubilee. All of this happening right around the same time. All right? Very, very interesting. All of it correlating with this 7-year tribulation. Why do I say September, though? Well, because, again, these feasts are a picture of Christ. He fulfilled the spring festivals, the first 4, during his earthly ministry. That means when he comes back at the rapture, which Paul talks about, the trump sounding, that's when we know that the Feast of Trumpets takes place. The Jews also refer to it as the feast of which no man knows the day or the hour. Paul says that the rapture will hear that trumpet. That's when the Jews blow that shofar 100 times, that last trump. I believe it will happen during the Feast of Trumpets, and Jesus will accomplish the first of those 3 fall feasts right then and there, and then he'll accomplish the other 2 as well. All right? All of it fits together so perfectly. But there's more, and I'm going over an hour, so hang in there, guys. It's worth it. I don't want to divide this into 2 videos. The blood moons. Talked about it before. I'm going to do it again briefly. These 4 blood moons. Always something significant happens in Jewish history to the Jewish people during these 4 blood moons. The first one, this 4th set of 4 blood moons, was in 1492. People know that. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. All right, what was happening at that time? Europe was, they were getting rid of their Jews. They wanted the Jews out of Europe. They were forcing them out. During those 4 blood moons in 1492, the Jews are being persecuted once again. They're being told to leave, which, by the way, Columbus, that guy that everyone loves to hate, had it not been for Columbus, a lot of the Jews may have been exterminated at that point. He took the Jews with him when he sailed to the new land. Okay? He was helping the Jews. All right? 1948 is the next set of 4 blood moons. Well, what happened then? Well, Israel becomes a nation again. 1967, the next set of 4 blood moons. What was that? The 6 Days War. And then there's this final set of 4 blood moons. And it takes place between 2011 and 2019, specifically 14 and 15. What's taking place during that time, though? Just in that general period of time? Well, December 6th of 2017, Donald Trump moves the capital back to Jerusalem. Okay? In fact, on May 14th of 2018, he ends up moving the embassy back. May 14, 2018. All right? Keep this in mind now. I don't have enough room. December 6, 2017, Donald Trump declares Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel once again. That's historic. That is monumental. Like the guy or not, and that's a topic for another day, he did that. May 14 of 2018, just 5 months later, he moves the embassy, the U.S. Embassy, back to Jerusalem. This was exactly 70 years from the time when Israel became a nation. They became a nation May 14, 1948. May 14, 1948, Israel becomes a nation. Exactly 70 years later, on May 14, 2018, the U.S. Embassy is moved back to Jerusalem. 70 years to the day. All right? Fascinating and pivotal in history. Pivotal in history in more ways than one, in more ways than which I can discuss in this video. All right, I want to go back to September 23 of 2017, what I was talking about before. What I was talking about, let's go there again. Go to Revelation 12, 1 and 2. Because this is going to tie into. I know this is jumping around a lot. I tried to put this as best I could to make it make sense and to keep it linear, but there's so much here, it's hard. It's really hard. All right. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her a crown of 12 stars. And she being with child cried, travailing in birth, and pained to be delivered. September 23, 2017. I talked about this. Now, I'm hoping, I've positioned where you can see this down here, I hope. We have Leo and Virgo. These are constellations. All right, a group of stars that supposedly form a picture, and actually they do. In this case, they really do. We'll see. All right, so Leo. What is Leo? Leo is a group of stars, a constellation. It looks a lot like a crown. Okay? Now, what's amazing here, there appeared a great wonder in heaven. Okay? That means the stars in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. This is Leo. Looks a lot like a crown. It says a crown of 12 stars. Well, typically speaking, Leo only has 8 stars. Except on September 23, 2017, there were 12 stars. Venus, Mars, and Mercury also became a part of the constellation Leo. Only on that day. Also, there's Virgo, which is the woman. Okay? This is fascinating too. This happened on the same date, September 23, 2017. Virgo, which is supposed to be a woman. Kinda? I don't know. I guess you could get a woman out of that, kind of. But anyway, the point being is, September 23, 2017, here's the fascinating thing. Verse 2. Oh no, let's go back to verse 1. A woman clothed with the sun was right up here on this constellation Virgo, and the moon under her feet. The moon was at the very bottom, the foot of Virgo, of this constellation. Excuse me. And upon her head a crown of 12 stars, Leo, right there above. And for the first and really only time, any other time that this constellation only has 8 stars. This day, September 23, 2017, had 12, just like the Bible says here. And she being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. I hope you can see this over here. Jupiter passed through Virgo, right through what would be her abdomen, did a complete circle, like it was, what do they call it, gestation, and then left. Jupiter goes into the abdomen of this woman in the stars, this constellation Virgo, did a circle, gestated, and then came out as though giving birth. She being with child cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. September 23, 2017, people were making a big deal about this, and for good reason. Again, we're not looking for signs, but it's right there. And again, we're not studying this for astrology to try to predict the future and what's the fates and reading my palm and all that stuff. It's astronomy, just studying the stars, which David told us to do. God placed them there for us. They tell stories. And this was telling a significant story right out of the book of Revelation. This Leo constellation with 12 stars, the only time that happened, on that same day, Virgo had the sun at her head, the moon at her feet, and Jupiter as a child going through her abdomen and then coming back out. Fascinating. And by the way, Jupiter moves into the womb and back out. How long did it take? 9 months. Just a coincidence, I'm sure. Just a coincidence that Jupiter took 9 months to move in and move out of the womb of Virgo. How long are most women usually pregnant for? 9 months. This lines up perfectly with what Revelation 12 is telling us about. All right? I don't know how anyone can think that this is just a coincidence or just a happenstance or whatever. It's amazing. And by the way, this was in the Shemitah cycle number 10. Now, usually speaking, what happens is anything that happens in the previous Shemitah cycle is forewarning what's going to happen in the next Shemitah cycle. So this happened in Shemitah cycle number 10 as a warning, I believe, as to what's going to happen in Shemitah number 11, that number of judgment, when God goes back to dealing with the Jews. Right here, Revelation 12, 1 and 2, Israel, which gave birth to the Messiah, okay? God goes back to dealing with the Jews in this time, this 11th Shemitah cycle, I believe, this 7-year tribulation, that 70th week of Daniel, when the Jews finally, as a whole, will recognize Jesus as their Messiah. That's not a coincidence. And it's happening here in Shemitah cycle number 10 as a warning as to what's going to happen in number 11. All right. Let's go to Genesis really quickly. Chapter 41. Genesis chapter 41. I want to show you something else really quickly. I'm sorry that this is going over 1 hour. I pray that you're still hanging in there because this is important. Genesis 41, verses 26 and 27, which says, "The 7 good kine are 7 years, and the 7 good years are 7 years. The dream is one. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kind that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty years, blasted with the east wind, shall be 7 years of famine." This is talking about Joseph, and Pharaoh had a dream, and Joseph was saying you're going to have 7 good years, and then you're going to have 7 bad years. Well, correlating with what we just talked about, the Shemitah cycle number 10 is probably the 7 good years. You can say, oh, these haven't been good years compared to what's coming. Oh yeah. These are the 7 good years. The next 7 years are the bad ones. Again, that correlates with the tribulation period. Tribulation period. By the way, Joseph was 17 at this time. 2017. How about that? You might say, oh, that's just coincidence. No, no, no. I think it's significant. I think it's very, very, very significant. Now, I want to talk very quickly about a couple of other things. Agenda 21, I think was, and I can't get into it much here. You're going to have to look it up for yourself, and not through your usual means. But I think they accomplished, and they, if you know what I'm talking about, you know who they are, during the whole COVID thing. Which, by the way, we've talked about this before, and I got to be really careful here. COVID-19, which, if you take the letters that correspond to each of those numbers in 19, you get A and I. How about that? Certificate of Vaccination ID, AI. We're hearing a lot about AI right now, aren't we? I would think so. But more than that, Agenda 2030, which is all about population control and a one world government and a one world currency and a one world religion. I talked about that at the top of the video, how all of that is starting to be accomplished right now. The Georgia Guidestones, well, they're not there anymore. I wonder why. Anyway, they hope to accomplish all of this 2030. Huh. I think they're going to be stopped from accomplishing that, because if you count back 7 years, you got 2023. But at the end of that 7 years, guess what happens? The Lord's coming back. Now, but for those 7 years, Agenda 2030, they'll probably accomplish quite a bit of what they're looking to do. We know there's going to be a one world religion, one world currency. We know that there's going to be something you have to take, the mark of the beast, if you want to buy or sell. They're already talking about it. 2030. Well, if you count back 7 years, what do you get? 2023. I think all of this is telling us a whole lot, and it's telling us something. And remember, it's funny that all of a sudden now they're acknowledging, and I say that loosely, very loosely, acknowledging that there could be aliens and UFOs and all this stuff when they've been denying it for years. See, that's a psyop. You deny something for so long so that people say, oh, they're denying it so much, it must be true. And then when they admit that it's true, they say, oh, see, I knew it all along. Well, why? Well, they're persuading you to believe this because when we rapture out of here, there has to be an explanation as to why we're gone. Right? And that's what the explanation will be. Oh, the UFOs got them. Well, isn't it ironic then that the UFOs only took Christians? I mean, but whatever. People will fall for it. Look, there's a whole bunch of these psyops that happen all the time. All the time. You have to be very careful about what you believe and what you lend credence to. All right? You need to check it. Well, how do you check it? How does it measure up against this, your King James Bible? That's how you check it. And on my other channel, my Liberty and Freedom Report, I'm going to be doing a video very soon about one of the more recent psyops that's been released lately that people are going crazy for. Yeah, we're going to take a look at that. I can't talk about it here. That's on my Rumble channel. I can go into that a lot more. So anyway, guys, I hope I made this clear. I tried to keep it concise and as linear as possible. I know I jumped around quite a bit. But that is it, guys. The Shemitah cycle, very well established. The Shemitah cycle is real. The Shemitah cycle is something that, yes, is for the Jews, but if it's there, we should be paying attention to it. Absolutely. All of it falls into place, guys. What I didn't know last time, that Jubilee, that 50th year, pushes the next Shemitah cycle back 1 year. Which makes sense. That's where we're at right now, 23. Agenda 2030. All of it fits, guys. The number of judgment, the 7-year tribulation, the 70th week of Daniel, the Feast of Trumpets, or the feast which no one knows the day or the hour. When Jesus comes back in September, I think it's coming soon. Very, very soon. I'm not going to set a date, but I'm still working on it. I'm going to keep digging and looking. Jesus said in Revelation 3:3, we can know even the hour. Even the hour. I'd like to know. I'd like to know. Because God wants me to know. That's why I want to know. Alright, guys. Again, sorry that this went over. Hang in there. Alright. The next video, we're going to build off some of this. We're going to maybe go a different direction, but it's going to be just as intense as this one. You guys need to take a look at this and really think about it. Get your Bible out, your King James Bible. Start putting the stuff together. Questions, comments, leave them below, or find me on Facebook, Instagram, and all the other social media platforms, or email, or whatever. Guys, do me a big favor. Please like this video. Please share this video. And then please subscribe to this channel. And then hit your notification bell so you'll know when new videos come out. We've got, we're settled in, so there's going to be plenty more of these videos in front of the whiteboard, proper Bible studies. But I'm trying to grow this channel. I'm trying to get this out to as many people as possible because we're in the end times. The end is near, and we need to get people saved. We need to get people saved. We can't do it, but we can lead them to the one who can, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And if you're not saved, I pray that you'll get saved. You don't want to be here for the tribulation period. Worse yet, you don't want to go to hell. If you are saved, what are you doing to get people saved, to get people to Christ? What are you doing? You can do a number of things. Witness, soul winning, hand out tracts, leave tracts at your table when you're at a restaurant, or share these videos. All of that helps. The more people that see these, hopefully the more people will come to the knowledge of truth. All right, guys. I hope all is well with you. We're praying for you. Please continue to pray for us. Take care, and God bless.